Welcome to the Transforming Trauma Podcast, a complex trauma podcast through the NARM Training Institute. My name is Sarah Buino, and I'm so excited to be sharing today's interview with you. Hey, Transforming Trauma listeners. Please join us starting in November for our online NARM Basics training to learn how to transform trauma. This online NARM Basics training is available for professionals working with clients or populations dealing with complex trauma. Now more than ever before, it is essential that we learn how to resolve complex trauma and support post-traumatic growth. NARM provides a relational approach to addressing the current COVID pandemic and tools to support healing in the aftermath of this collective trauma. If you're looking for more advanced training in complex trauma and are working in mental health, healthcare, education, substance abuse recovery, or allied fields, join us for this Level 1 NARM training to become a NARM-informed professional. For more information and to apply, please visit www.narmtraining.com/online basics. Our guest on Transforming Trauma today is Dr. Mazen Atassi. Mazen is a doctor of naturopathic medicine and the founder of Forward to Health, a holistic wellness clinic and educational initiative. Dr. Mazen practices vitalistic natural medicine, weaving together homeopathy, botanical medicine, hydrotherapy, and nutrition, with a specialty in somatic trauma therapy, NARM. He has patients and students across the world. He lives in Chicago with his wife and daughter. Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Mazen Atassi. Hi, Mazen. Welcome to Transforming Trauma. How are you?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. I'm doing well.
Yeah, and we'll start off this interview very much like a NARM session and ask what you would like listeners to get out of today.
So, what I'm hoping for is a deeper appreciation of the principles of NARM. I really feel deeply that what NARM speaks to is not just a clinical model, not something that we as practitioners, as healthcare workers, as frontline workers are exclusively to be using. But these are principles that I would hope could be underlined and emphasized to the greater population as a way of creating conscious culture, of a healthy civilization, healthy families. The relational dynamics that NARM is always speaking to are so rooted in our biology, in our relationships, in our everything, our connection to the sacred. Everything is informed by these principles, the mind-body principle, the inter and intra-relational processes, the emergence of process, and containment and agency, and these things. These things are crucial. And they're not just for the clinical space for that hour a week or whatever.
Right.
These are tools to bring to our lives and to, give to parents, give to teachers,
Yes,
give to clergy. These are deep principles. And that's what I would really hope to maybe underline for today.
And what I heard out of that, to just kind of summarize, is NARM principles are for everyone.
Yeah.
Right. So let's start to dig into what it is that you do and how you utilize NARM. So tell us about the population that you work with and how you're using it in your work.
I'm a naturopathic doctor. So I am not the normative practitioner or trainee. And funny story, when I came to the NARM training initially in 2016, about 4 years ago now, there was a room full of therapists, room full of counselors, 10, 20, 30 years in practice. So I'm showing up, I was still in medical school, and they kept asking me every module, like, what the heck are you doing here? You're a naturopath. Aren't you supposed to be sending people home with supplements? Yeah. But they were
Right.
just so confused, and curious. And I told them, listen, we have principles in our medicine. The principles of Tolle Totem, treating the whole person, and Tolle Causam, addressing the root cause of disease. And that is very important for our medicine. And the realm of naturopathic medicine is principle-based. And so it may look differently in different times when there's different needs and different access to different resources and whatnot. So I told them, I'm very much a naturopath here, but I see something very special in trauma work and in the relational work. And I had some experience with SE and stuff like that previously as well. So I was familiar with somatics, but NARM pulled me. And I bring it into my practice now. I have a practice here in Chicago, and I do the traditional naturopathic stuff. So I do homeopathy and hydrotherapy and botanicals and supplements and acupuncture and all that jazz, nutrition, all that jazz. But I bring in the NARM, and the NARM piece is central to my work. It informs the relationship, the doctor-patient relationship, which is a very sacred relationship.
Yeah.
Really have to be able to honor that relationship if we really want to support the individual to heal. And I mean that very intentionally because it is the patient that heals. It is not the doctor. It is not me. I'm not working any magic behind the scenes. I'm not chanting, behind the curtain or something. That's not how this works. We're
Right.
we're trying to rouse the vital force. We're trying to rouse agency, hope, resiliency, strength, all of these things to come forth. And out of the distortions and out of the compensations to reorganize in a new health affirmative way. So I use all my tools, but NARM is right in the middle. And I almost encourage people, even new patients who have chronic diseases, autoimmune. I don't want to, this is not a medical podcast. So,
But go there because this directly ties to the ACEs and
right,
for listeners who might not know what that is, I'll just define that quickly. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which directly linked poor health outcomes to childhood trauma, in addition to mental health outcomes as well.
exactly. Yeah,
So go there. What
go
are you
there.
seeing? You said autoimmune. What other things are you seeing that people are bringing in that you are directly linking to their trauma?
I mean, we have psychological issues, as we're all familiar: depression, anxiety, addiction,
Mhm.
all these other things. And then you have the full spectrum from just some gut disturbances, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, pain, headaches, migraines, to full on, autoimmune, body attacking itself. The vital force is super confused. It doesn't know who's friendly, who's
Mm.
foe. There's chaos
Mhm.
internally, unhealthy relationships, marriage. I mean, we see it all. And so what we're trying to do is really in a rational way, but also in a very purposeful way, begin to organize the therapeutic order of interventions. And for everyone who comes in, it's usually always the counseling that starts first.
Yeah.
Because, I can give people in a 2-hour naturopathic visit a whole map as to how to change their lives. I do a food
Mhm.
intolerance test, take out your food intolerance, add this to your diet, take these supplements and herbs, do this qigong and workout and whatever, all these different things. But if they don't feel themselves worthy, for example,
Mhm.
and they can't self-care because there's all the shame around it. There's so much there that I can't waste their time and their resources, my time and my resources without seeing and addressing the root cause, which is that shame, that
Yeah.
identification about who they are and what they're worthy of and their enoughness. And so we have to be able to go there. And sometimes we see amazing things happen just by doing the counseling physiologically.
Yeah. I'm curious because I happen to know someone who's a functional medicine doc, and I get to hear a lot of stories. And I know functional medicine and naturopathy are different, but a
Mhm,
similar sort of population that tends to come in, I'm guessing.
mhm,
And one of the things that this person has told me over and over is that people want to come in, have you give them a pill and have them be fixed. And
right,
from what he's seeing, there can be quite a resistance to getting the mental health help that they
mhm,
truly need. Since you were a student when you were getting NARM, I'm curious if you
mhm.
have like a before and after comparison to how you were working before NARM and then how you're working after and the results that you see with the patients.
Well, before I was introduced to NARM, I was doing a lot of SE,
Okay. Somatic experiencing. Yeah.
somatic experiencing, and my mentor was a SEP, a somatic experiencing practitioner, and he was a homeopath as well, and he was kind of this eclectic
Mm,
healer. He was the one kind of that inspired me at the beginning to take to naturopathic medicine, and I was practicing with him at the side. And so I was doing a lot of that. I had to have friends and family I'd kind of dabble with, if you will, just, tension releasing exercises on the ground here and get people shaking out their, you know,
mhm.
their iliopsoas muscle. And, so I was doing a lot of somatic stuff. I was reading Lowen, I read Levine, I read van der Kolk, I was interested in polyvagal theory, I was familiar with it, and so that was kind of my introduction, my beginning of my somatic journey was with those types of approaches. But when NARM came into my life and that top-down element came in,
Mhm.
it offered so much structure. Because
Right.
before, you really didn't have any idea what would come up and what was gonna happen, and it was really chaotic. And I felt like I was, like, tapping into that chaos and just hoping it went well,
Yeah.
like, I didn't know what I
Right.
was doing, and a part of
Right.
that is obviously the process, which you're not supposed to really know. You just trust the process. But it was unsettling because people would leave and not really feeling better or feeling like they gained anything from it. And that was disheartening for me. And I felt like,
Mm,
two,
mhm,
three, 4 sessions, and there wasn't really anything shifting deeply, for
mm,
example, about these belief systems. And
right,
so when NARM came, it really offered me, a full model true to the somatic principles of the bottoms up processing of the body, of the emotions, of sensations, but also recognizing that there's a top down element here that is so crucial. And that relationship to self at the center of it is
right.
something that cannot be overlooked, cannot be undermined. It's a type of bypassing that we
Yes,
do in the
yes.
therapeutic world by not going there. And so NARM has been amazing. It's really changed my life.
I feel like so as a therapist, I can often see what's getting in the way, right? That's my job to essentially feel into what is happening with the client and see what's getting in the way. And what I would come up against time and time again is, like you said, the shame that really gets in the way. And
Mhm,
I've been saying this for years. I'd done training with Brene Brown, and so I'd done a lot of shame work, but empathy is not the only thing that we need when it comes to shame resilience. We really do need self compassion, and
mhm,
nobody can give self compassion to you. It
mhm,
has to come from within. And what I found in NARM that's so remarkable is that we don't have to force it. It's just the way that the top down questioning sort of opens up space for that compassion to naturally arise. And it's like I'm seeing change. I was sitting with a client just before we're doing this recording and remarking on, like, I'm feeling into her nervous system and she's like, okay, for the first time in 3 years.
mhm.
And
Amazing.
part of it is, I think, because we've been working with this modality. So I
Mhm.
can only imagine with the folks who are struggling with illness, coming in to see you, how that shifts.
It's so exciting. It's so beautiful to see the shift.
Hmm.
And it's like you get a share of that yourself, just being in relationship with them as they're
Hmm.
going through the transformation. It's like you get some of that too. It's a transactional gift. It's like just this amazing thing, like you being a part of their journey, you get to in some way, reap a benefit or reap some light or reap some blessing in that. And it's such a beautiful thing. I remember even in the training, in the NARM training, we're doing these breakout groups. And at some point, I was one of maybe two or three men in the entire group.
Right.
So I'm like this naturopath in my, late 20s, and I'm a man in this ocean of female
Right.
therapists. It was really interesting. I really had a good time. But one time we were in these breakout groups and we were doing our sessions with our assistants, and I tapped into something very deep of my work.
Mm.
And there was a lot of anger, right?
Hmm.
And I tapped into it and it turned into like a really bottoms up kind of thing because there was just so much of it. And I'm sitting there, this Arab guy, holding all this anger, and I'm talking about it like I could literally nuke something with this anger. There's so much of it
Yeah.
right now. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, "Oh my god, I just said as an Arab that I'm gonna blow something up. Oh my
Right.
god, what
Yeah.
how are they holding this?" And I finished the
Yeah.
session, I'm looking around, there's 4 other women, and they're all thanking me like, "Oh my god, I felt every ounce of that with you, and
Wow.
thank you for that." And I was like, "Wow, okay, wonderful. You're welcome." But there's so much, I mean, the morphic field, the fields that connect us, the energetics that connect us are so rich and so vibrant that if we open ourselves up to that, it's not even that we're doing anything for people, it's like we are sharing in this gift of life, in this gift
Mhm.
of healing, and it's such a beautiful thing. It's like it's springtime in every session. It's like this rebirth. It's springtime when people have these shifts, even if it's in the middle of winter. It's
Right.
unbelievable.
Well, because trauma is disconnection from self and
Mhm,
oftentimes disconnection from others. And so
mhm,
reintroducing that or introducing it for the first time for some of our clients too, that's a growth.
mm,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Since you see a population who's not coming to you for mental health, I'm curious how you define complex trauma to a patient who's walking in.
Well, actually, I've become almost known now for mental health. I speak now to the Muslim community specifically as a Muslim. There's a great need for people to be able to articulate the issues of the community at this level. And, there's a lot of spiritual bypassing that occurs, brushing it under, oh, spiritual disease, sins, and stuff like that. And a lot gets bypassed. And so I've become almost as this naturopath specialized in this trauma work. So I'm getting a lot of people that just come for the counseling. They get more than that, but that's what they come for because that's what I'm becoming known for. But generally, how I define complex trauma, it's a biopsychosocial process. It's a biological, body-based, psychological, experiential, social relational process, not a disease. And it's so important that we get this because people with addictions, we had a conversation in my community recently on addictions. And the first thing I just drilled it actually. It was the first thing I said, and I drilled it the entire time. And I said, if you don't get anything else this hour, get this. Addiction is not the disease, it is a symptom. It is a response to something,
And
you
let's
know?
unpack that really quickly because I'm
Mm,
sensitive to this because this is my area of expertise. And
lovely.
I'm listening with the ear of somebody who has been adopting the disease model for
Mm,
addiction. And so I just want to be really careful to tease out the nuances of this because I completely agree with you. I think that we needed addiction to be considered a disease at a certain period in time so that it was
mhm,
taken seriously. And now at this point, because I read this meta article at one point that talked about this exact argument essentially that if it was truly a disease, like is it the pancreas that produces insulin? I'm saying
yes,
things like I know right. So we
it does.
can't like decide for the pancreas to produce insulin. Like that
Mhm,
we can't really compare diabetes to addiction in the same way because we can't force our organs to change, but
mhm.
we can influence choices in addiction. And so I completely agree with you with that, but just want to make sure that if anybody is listening in recovery, they're not like, what is he talking about? Like we're pulling out some of the threads of what gets in the way from people doing the next step of their healing.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, what I was speaking to really is in the vitalistic model of medicine, there's two philosophies of medicine that you find in any tradition of medicine worldwide, traditionally, historically, to the modern time. There is a vitalistic and there is the mechanistic.
Hmm.
In mechanism, you have that disease is a function of cells, of tissues, of parts of the bodies that become broken, that break. And
Hmm.
so the
Hmm.
function of the doctor is to change that part.
Right.
And that's where we can have this hyper specialization of medicine, where you have a cardiologist working only at the
Right.
level of the heart, meaning just taking the heart out of the entire body, focusing on the heart, and then putting it back in.
Right.
And I mean, I'm kind of reducing it in some way, but they've also
Right.
reduced it significantly as well,
Right. Yeah.
more so than I'm reducing it now. And so in that model, everything is just physical. It's reduced to one
Yes.
or two elements. And if you fix that, you fix everything.
Yeah.
It does not take into consideration the whole, does not
Right.
take into consideration the causes, the roots of it, its
Right.
implications, and it definitely does not take into consideration the vital force, which is responding to everything. It's responding and, with compensations, and there's reactions to stimuli that are a function of the vital force. And then you have in vitalistic medicine, which is in our medicine, as naturopaths, the belief that it's the vital force, it's the spirit, it's whatever you want to call that, chi, prana, orgone, energy. That's what responds to the environment. That's what responds to trauma in the
Yes.
in this work, right? Very intelligent. It's very pro self. It's defends the self. It's adaptive. It can become maladaptive in time, and that's what disease is. But it's not about. It's the process of trying to adapt to a situation, right? And that's what I was kind of speaking to with the addiction.
Yep.
It's not that it's just this genetic thing. It can be elements of behavior and trauma that get transferred, transgenerational processes and behaviors and states. Those are there. But at a fundamental level, it's the vital force that's responding in process to that. And it's a really important piece, not just in psychology or psychiatry, but in medicine at large, in creating culture and civilization and healthy spirituality, because
Mhm.
if things get reduced to a materialistic piece, everything, then there's no more relationships. There's no
Right.
more process of growth or, there's no more transformation. Everything becomes go to the doc and have it fixed.
Mhm.
and woe is me and shame on me and I have no power and I have no agency,
Right.
you know, and this is my fate. And it's very non-life affirmative.
And are you speaking specifically about the Muslim community in terms of faith with that, or just everyone that you see?
No, everybody. Everybody has a spirit, you know, everyone has a spirit, and it doesn't matter its color or its texture.
Right,
Everyone has
right.
belief systems and everyone has a connection to the sacred and to
Absolutely.
nature. And so that's what I'm speaking to. It's a human phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, just thinking about spirituality as related to trauma, since you are doing a lot of speaking gigs, that may be something that you've really talked about before. Just give me the jazz, give me what you got.
Okay.
It's not really a
So
question, but
no, it's okay. It's a good
yeah.
question. It's an important question because, you know, anytime we meet in the Muslim community, there's a lot of taboo and stigmatizing around mental health. And I want to differentiate between the cultural religion and the actual tradition of the religion, if you will. You know, the orthodox, the living tradition, and how that can get changed, it can get modified, it can get adulterated when it moves into culture, right? Because religion looks different in different places. Like, for example, Islam in Morocco, West Africa, looks very different than Islam in Chicago. And
Mhm,
Islam in Chicago looks very different than Islam in China or Islam in India. They have different dress, they have different language, they have different food and cuisine, they have different etiquettes and whatnot, though the immutables of the faith remain. And so cultural Islam can have a certain type of taboo or stigma against mental health. That wasn't always the case, but this is kind of the feature of 21st century cultural religion, maybe even, but cultural Islam, at least for me in my experience. And so when we talk about mental health, we have kids now in high school in the West, right? Post 9/11 Islam in America, dealing with bullying with Islamophobia, lack of identity. They don't know who they are. My parents are immigrants, or my grandparents were immigrants. And I can kind of relate to overseas. You know, we go there in the summer and I kind of can get by with the language. And I guess you're my family, you know, we can share the last name and you had my nose, you know. But then not you because I don't speak the language and I'm not going to school there and I'm missing so much. And then I'm here and then people are telling me go back home and you don't belong and
mm,
all that jazz. So it's
right,
like, well, who am I? And you know, and then from that type of trauma
mhm,
and that feeling of unrootedness, there are a lot of compensations. There's distortions of identity.
right,
There's shame and guilt that comes in. You know, there's resentment and anger and all these different things are now circulating in the psyche, in the blood, in the vital
in
force,
the
you
body,
know,
mhm,
and you can see now a cultural force of these happening. And this is happening also probably for other communities, you know, this is not again a feature of Islam, but we see a lot of stigmatization of mental health in our communities. And so people will say, oh, you know, there's a devil, or you've been hit with the evil eye,
right,
or you've probably sinned, your child has sinned, or they've done something bad and have not repented. And so you must repent, you must go give alms, charity, maybe travel to Mecca and pray forgiveness. And those are all beautiful things, and I'm not going to dismiss those things, but they're missing the core piece here of the subjective experience of these people as human beings with hearts, with emotions, with, you know, all of these hardware of feeling that does not get addressed, it's not spoken to, it's not respected. And so that gets bypassed with spiritual talk, with
right,
spiritual jargon.
mhm,
And it's a travesty. People end up losing faith. People end up losing the sense of self, coping with addictions and harmful behaviors and stuff like that. And so it's a lot, it's a mess. What I'd like to talk about is that, you know, emotions are part of the human experience. You cannot want to be at peace with everything. You know, Islam is about oneness,
right,
the oneness of God and the oneness of creation and the oneness of man, capital M, men and women. You can't be at oneness if you hate yourself and you're
right,
fragmented and you don't know who you are and you're ashamed of speaking and you're afraid to express yourself and afraid of your sexuality and intimacy. You can't be fully whole, which is the number one, you know, if there was to be one principle of Islam, it's oneness. You know, it's really just about oneness.
mhm,
And yet, that is the obstacle to cure. That is the obstacle to spiritual realization,
right,
this fragmentation of the soul, this relegation of what feels bad and looks bad as something actually intrinsically bad that can't be discussed, and then what happens is, to use a Jungian term, it gets shuttled into the shadow. And we just have these huge shadow pieces. People's, identities, people's emotions, people's will, people's resiliency, their creativity, their sense of purpose in their lives, all these things get pushed and stuffed into the shadow. And then they use medications, and I'm not saying there's no use for medications, but as a pattern, we find more and more suppression, more and more suppression,
Right.
lack of addressing of the root causes of disease, which is
Right.
sole intention of good healing.
Right. Just give me an opioid so I won't feel the
Yeah,
pain, but let's not
right,
address what's actually causing the pain. Right.
right, exactly. Or give me a religion, give me a dose of, cultural religion, which will make me feel better about myself, but not actually help me until I have to act out in some other way. And so
Right.
it's a huge thing, it's an unbelievable thing. You'd be surprised as to the kinds of people that come in to see me. Very impressive people, very intelligent people, resilient people, and yet very suppressed, very suppressed. I find people that are amazing, I'll share with you a story. I have this wonderful patient. I think she's like 22, 23 years old, and depressed and suppressed beyond belief. And she's a beautiful girl, and she is, I mean, literally, she has the whole world ahead of her.
Mm.
She has all this potential. She's memorized the Quran, the holy
Wow.
book of the Muslims, in Arabic,
Wow.
and she memorized it in English,
Oh
which
my, double
which
duty.
I've never heard before. It's common for Muslims to memorize the holy book in Arabic because we recite it in prayer and it's part of our
Okay.
lives. But I mean, to memorize it in English is like memorizing the Bible. I mean, imagine memorizing the Bible.
No,
It's like
I will
word for
not.
word. Yeah. So super impressive. And you ask her, why did she do that? And she has a great story about, wanting to find herself and using religion and this and that, and her not feeling like she has any other proud. She's so like, I have all these great things going for me. Why am I feeling like this? I must be ungrateful. It must be because of my sins. And
Mm.
there was so much work and psychoeducation that had to be done around this individual's sense of self
Yeah.
and making sense of her experiences, because she was using spirituality and religion as, a salve, a suppressive steroid that did away with the symptom, but made her feel worse, made her feel more paralyzed.
Because it wasn't working. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't working in addressing the root causes of her pain. Exactly. And so I differentiate, good religion and bad religion. You know,
Hmm.
I have full conviction in my religion, but there's good and bad ways, beautiful and ugly ways, if you will,
Mhm.
that it shows up, that it is applied, you know,
Mhm.
that it informs a community. And I
Yeah.
really feel NARM and this type of work. I mean, literally, it can in months and years transform people and transform families and communities, heal transgenerational wounds. People are coming here from war-torn countries and poverty and decades and centuries of abuse and colonization. And this is embedded in our DNA. This becomes
Mhm.
embedded in our, I mean, in iridology, the diagnosis of the eye. They say there's 4 years of generational patterns that are embedded in the iris of the eye. Yeah. And this is an old diagnostic that naturopaths and others have used. But like
Wow.
there is a memory, I mean, beyond what even maybe, the memory of the body, the body keeps the score type stuff. Like it's really deep. And so we have to be able to, really respect that and understand that and make room for that. And with no shame and no judgment and endless compassion, as much as we can bring, begin to help people help themselves, bring compassion to themselves, heal their wounds, and begin to dissolve these old destructive patterns so that they can be healthy and they can have the spiritual life that they want, have that rich, vital, robust spirituality that they crave, but does not end up harming them in the
Right.
long run. Yeah.
Well, and what I hear you talking about that's really been showing up for me, both personally and professionally, is the two sides, opposite sides of the same coin, right? So there's
Mm,
either hyper religiosity, where I'm never going to live up to the tenets of my religion and therefore I am a bad person and all of that, or I
mm,
reject the religion completely and it has no place in my life. But it's the space in between. It's protective in some way to stay in the black and white, right? I'm guessing because I can really relate to your client's experience from my
mhm.
mother's religiosity kind of being like heaped on
Yeah.
me too, and
Mhm.
how protective it is for a young person to need to stay connected to the religion in order to stay connected to their parents.
Exactly.
And the fact that she was able to come into you and ask for help, knowing that you provide this counseling as well. And I'm guessing that there was a shift for her?
Well, we actually did only 1 or 2 sessions, and then I was traveling, and then I haven't heard from her since, so I'm hoping to continue with her in time, but,
Mm, mhm,
that session for me was just really emblematic because you can see how much she cared for her connection to God and her faith. I mean, memorizing 2 books, it's like,
mhm,
who does that? It's unbelievable zeal
mhm.
and love, but it was used in potentially, and God knows best, but at least in terms of her presentation, in not the most adaptive manner. And I
Right.
was trying to help her see that, and you're right, exactly. It was a way of her not putting blame on and shaming her parents who maybe
Mhm.
were not there for her in the way that she needed to. But again, one of the major elements of our faith is actually, again, it's not an exclusively Muslim feature, is respect of one's parents. It's like the love of God and the love of one's parents are like taught like this.
Mhm.
There's so much loyalty to the family, maybe more so than modern Western civilization
Oh, for
nowadays
sure.
has become. There's a
Yeah.
lot of loyalty, so it makes it very difficult for someone to really work through that if they don't understand. That's why people, they come to me and they say, "Thank you for doing this work because I've gone to other people and God bless them. They tried their best to help me, but they don't understand our culture. They don't understand our
Mhm.
background and the patterns and where they come from." And oftentimes, they can be, for maybe non-NARM practitioners, an agenda of sorts that they feel into, and they say, "This is not going to be useful for me,"
Right.
and so they reject therapy.
Mm.
They reject getting the help, and they'll go try other things. But like I was mentioning earlier, even people that try homeopathy and herbs and acupuncture, I love those things, and I use those things every day, especially homeopathy. I'm a big fan of homeopathy, but the type of passivity to those types of things, like, I'm sick, here, put needles in
Right.
me. I'm
Right.
gonna sit still, and I'm gonna leave, and I'm gonna expect me to feel better you
Mhm.
know? And it's like, that's not supporting agency again. There's something
Mhm.
about going consciously into it, and the work is so important. But, if there isn't a safe vessel for the work, people won't do it. And so there needs to be these fundamental features of the safe container for the healing work to be done. And I'm happy and I'm honored to be able to be one of those people that can do that for the community.
That's wonderful. And I'm guessing I don't know enough about Islam to speak to it, but I know from my time in Christianity that the things that Jesus said are not the things that Christians are saying most of the time. And so I'm
Mm,
wondering, because I think often the way that people are practicing religion is what becomes that oppression, right? Not only how we're practicing it for ourselves, but how our families are practicing it. So I'm guessing
totally.
Mohammed wasn't, wasn't necessarily telling people they should be shaming themselves and blaming
No,
themselves for
absolutely
everything.
not. No, and there's actually, I'm really happy because now in the past year or 2, there's been literature, there's been books
Mm.
published on the emotional social intelligence of the Prophet Muhammad.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah, and, these are amazing books because they weren't really, we have books on the life and the description of the personality and the
Mm,
habits of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but there wasn't a focused work or a focused genre of works that really focus on the inner development of
mm,
a human being. We have spirituality in the form of Sufism, of tasawwuf. This is Sufism is like the, if you will, the symbol of Sufism in the West is Maulana Rumi. He was, an Orthodox Sunni Muslim. He was a jurist of sacred law, but he was also this great mystic.
Mhm.
And, he's the most widely read poet now
Mhm.
in the world, and he would speak to the remedy being in the wound and having to address go into it, and so suppression was not part of that early understanding, not part of this truly spiritual understanding, and not way of the prophet, because you don't find him in any way with his companions and his disciples or his family suppressing them, and his way of transformation and his way of guiding them to what's better was always done in such a beautiful way, in a graceful way. And this is the kind of thing that I'm hoping to inspire people to really go back to and
Right.
begin to apply in their lives. These are things that maybe seem as like the softer sciences of the religion.
Mhm.
These are the things that make or break people, because you're right. People that are oppressed, that are wounded, they will use religion as a weapon.
Yeah.
It will become organized through their biases, through their distortions, and it will be used against themselves fundamentally, which we have to have
Right.
compassion for, which is really, even with people that are the most odious of people in some way to me, the people that hurt people and the terrorists and whatnot.
Mhm.
And there's terrorists of all religions and all cultures and all colors of
Mhm.
people.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
these are the people that we have to be able to understand that they're doing wrong, that they're transgressing people and the rights of people. And this is an obvious, notable, markedly obvious harm that we have to work against preventing. But also recognizing at the human level, these people are suffering. And
Yep.
whatever they're expressing of harm and destruction outwardly, that's 10% of what they do to themselves.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
really believe that.
I do too.
Same with people like, Gabor Mate. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about Trump, and he mentions Trump, as this type A narcissist, the grandiosity and the objectivity and all these different things. And yet we know his background was such that he had to respond. His dad was like him. How do you react when you have a father like Trump?
Mhm.
You either
Mhm.
become like him or you become
A therapist.
right. That's hilarious. Right.
Right. But talk about trauma, right? The trauma of,
Um,
we do talk a lot in NARM about the narcissistic abuse that
mm,
so many people have suffered. And it's interesting that narcissism is kind of getting this like heyday in popular culture, at least the understanding and the want to recover from that narcissistic abuse.
totally. Totally, it's a
Mhm.
good thing. I have people that have come to me recently just asking advice. I had this person in my life, and they'll describe the textbook narcissist. I'm like, "Yo, you gotta get out of that ASAP. You gotta cut that business deal. If there's a marriage, like, you have to be very careful with that, because if you let that go, it becomes very toxic." It's actually one of my great self accolades, if you will, helping people in a relationship with narcissists
Mm.
go through the process of breaking that up, whether it was through with in
Mm.
marriage, whether it marriage, whether it was business partners that were extremely toxic,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, helping people see it. The narcissist, is a very intelligent, I mean, even if it's not even conscious of what it's doing, very, very intelligent archetype, the trickster in some way. And you have to be very careful with that. You have to navigate that very intelligently, but also with strength and with courage
And agency. Yeah.
and agency. They will deflate, but you have to be hold strong. And there's a storm, and there's all these different things that you have to watch out for. We call that in medicine the healing crisis. When things are going right, we give the right homeopathic remedy and we fix the diet, and now there's this massive aggravation of the condition. We may be like, "Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate. Get some rest, take some days off work." And inwardly, we're clapping and we're celebrating, because that's exactly
Mhm.
a vital force as it becomes unstuck and now is reorganizing and restructuring the internal world and external worlds. And that is a good sign. And so when you see an
Yep.
aggravation in a relationship with somebody who's very toxic, know that it's a good sign that there's renegotiation happening there, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we see that in therapy too. Some clients are like,
Totally.
"Why am I not feeling better?" Because you're actually working on the stuff now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's a good sign.
We're coming to the end. You told us about one client already, but or patient, but
Mm,
I'm curious if you have a success story or a particular story of struggle that you'd be interested to share with us.
mm. You know, actually, I have a story. I was speaking last weekend in Pittsburgh, and there was someone who came up. I did a demo, actually. I was speaking on mental health and addiction for the whole weekend. It was a community type event at the mosque. And at the end of a 6 hour kind of workshop, I asked earlier if anyone was interested in doing a demo and just kind of demoing the work for people to kind of just see it because it's really heady, talking about mental health
Yeah,
and
yeah.
relational dynamics and trauma and healing and agency. It's like, that's really heady stuff. And can we see it? And so I'm like, okay, let's do a demo. So I brought someone up and she was hesitant, but then she's like, no, I want to do it. So I was okay. So she came up and ended up being she wants to trust, and it was pretty much a trust style. We did about half an hour. It was just a demo. I told her, this is not an actual session. We just wanted to kind of show people and show yourself kind of what the work is about. And what was really interesting was it clicked for people because at some point she was talking about being able to open up with people and trust people, and she had this superficial relationship with everybody, and she didn't let anybody in.
Mhm.
And, she was really hard on herself and using religion again, like, but the prophet told us to love one another and to share, and that the believer is the mirror of the believer, and I can't do this. And there's all this shame, you know?
Mhm.
And we went back and there's all this early wounding, and people could just feel the room shifting as she shared that. And then the most obvious thing, obviously, that I had to point to was, look at, you came up here and you're talking about wanting to connect deeply with people and not surface level. You've let everybody in here. And then you just see her like blink a couple times
Right.
and then just tears and the whole room is shifting. And
Mm.
and I'm like, take a moment here and just see what's happening. And she couldn't believe it. Like it was obvious, and NARM we're just that's the relational piece. It's like we're just noticing the obvious in the moment together. I invited her if she was willing to just turn the chair a little bit and look around
Mhm.
and just notice how that's like. And everyone was there and very beautiful. Like in the NARM trainings, everyone's very warm and
Right,
loving in the NARM training.
right.
It was like that. And, it was so beautiful. And I asked her, what do you see? She said, I see really beautiful, happy, validating faces.
Mm.
And I was like, how is it for you to just notice that and let people in? And she's like, it's wonderful, and just you started you can feel her just whole body relax, her shoulders, her face. She's crying, but she's smiling, and it was really touching. It was really, really touching. That was just on Saturday evening. And so this is the work that we're doing. This is the work that you're doing. This is what NARM is all about. It's bringing people back to life and getting them out of their blind spots, out of their stagnations and their stucknesses. The work is not difficult, but it's not easy.
Mhm.
It's there, it's open, it takes intention, it takes courage, but it is one of the most fulfilling things that we can do in our lives. I have no doubt about that. And I just found, it was touching. I walked away from that. I'm like, if that was all I did for the whole day, you know,
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And just to go back to your initial intention for today was to hope that people gain a deeper appreciation for the principles of NARM. We talked about a lot of that, really creating space for self-compassion to come up and not using the spiritual bypassing. So I think you nailed it.
Right on. Well done. Capturing it from me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine entirely.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. If you want to learn more, you can check out the show notes or visit us at www.narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma. Please join us for our online NARM training in learning how to transform trauma. This online NARM basics training is available for professionals working with clients or populations dealing with complex trauma. Join us for this Level 1 NARM training to become a NARM-informed professional. For more information and to apply, please visit at www.narmtraining.com/online-basics. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We really look forward to building community and connection with you and changing the world by transforming trauma.